Hey guys, this is S. Draconis, and today I'd like to share with you one of my newer builds that I've been working on. I call it the Superman mDK build, and it's really designed to maximize your battlefield presence. So we're talking not only holding ground, but also pushing ground and retreating ground with minimum losses to you or your team. So if you like to brawl, if you like to be in the thick of the fighting, if you like to play tanky characters, or if you just enjoy receiving hate tells from strangers, then this build is definitely the one for you. So, a bit of background information. I've been playing TESO for about 2 to 3 years, and if you look at all of my characters, most of them end up being super tanky, and I think you guys probably know me best as that wedding dress E-tank, who just sits on choke points and waves hello. Now, I don't normally do build videos on YouTube, but this build turned out to be so incredible, so mind-blowing, and so rarely used that I thought it was worth throwing it out there to you guys. Now, as some of you might have guessed, I call it the Superman build because it pumps out these huge numbers that I've never seen before in any other build. And if we can just bring up the trifecta table, we've got DPS, we've got heals, and we've got tanking numbers. Now, most builds can only do 1 or 2 of these really well. So if you've got the DPS meta, you've got high DPS, high heals, but low tank ability, and vice versa for the tanks who can pump out heals and take damage but don't have any DPS. Okay, moving on to gear. Now the setup that I've run for this is 2-piece Bloodspawn. This can either be Bloodspawn or Malubeth. They both work really well. You either want to maximize your mitigation, which is what Bloodspawn does well, or pump up your healing, which is what Malubeth's going to do for you. Now also pair this, the important bit is to run 5-piece Varen's Legacy, and what this is going to do is pretty much triple your lifesteal and your damage on your Deep Breath. You know, that DK skill that lets you pretty much hit everyone around you. This number is going to go from 1,500 to around 5,000 damage, so a little bit more than triple. And you know, that lifesteal is going to work just fine on 5,000 damage. If you can imagine, this hits 6 people around you, so you know your tooltip damage is really going to look like 30,000, with the lifesteal pumping that up to 45,000. Obviously, you're going to have mitigation after that, but you can see the potency and the potential here to just make waves. So we got 5-piece Varen's Legacy, we got 2-piece Bloodspawn. I also got a 5-piece Desert Rose to round out the set. Now you could use Cerebane here instead of DR. They both kind of work well in terms of Magicka Fountain. I prefer Desert Rose because Cerebane's a little bit too block reliant, because if I were to run Cerebane, I'd have 2 sets that really counts on me having block and people attacking me. So Desert Rose gives me a little bit more flexibility, helps me to get in and out of large groups easily, and just makes the experience a whole lot smoother in my opinion. Now, one important thing to note is that I'm running 6 pieces sturdy with 2 end pen. So I got shield and shoulder end pen. Ideally, I want to kind of max out my sturdy trait. I want to try to hit 7 or 8. You want to have at least 6, and the more you have, the better. And this is based on the mathematical principle where, if you think about it, in Cyrodiil you have 50% base healing taken. So an additional 1% healing taken there would be exactly the same as 2% healing done, assuming a base 100% healing done in Cyrodiil. Now the numbers are going to be a little bit less static than that, but you get the idea. And the idea being, the more you stack sturdy, the more you stack block cost reduction, the more mileage it's going to give you. I'll be linking an Excel that kind of gives us the math on that. And long story short, if you go from 8 sturdy, if you look at your block cost reduction going from 8 sturdy to 6 sturdy on a maxed out setup, you're going to be effectively tripling your block cost going from 8 to 6. That's just an 8% reduced block cost difference on your gear, but it's going to triple the amount of stamina your block is going to cost you. So something to think about as you're balancing out your gear. What else do I want to talk about? I got these jewels. One other pitfall that you want to avoid with Varen's Legacy especially is you want to make sure you run 5-piece Varens on your body. The reason for that being, if you run Varens on your weapons and you weapon swap, that's going to cause you a lot of problems. I mean, they're pretty much bugs, because you shouldn't run into problems with with sets being on your weapons. But for me, essentially what happens is when you run into a Zerg, they're hitting you, you weapon swap, and you pretty much lose your Varen's proc. Like, it just doesn't work for you. You have to wait a couple seconds for it to come back up, which usually ends up killing you. So the important bit is to run 5-piece Varen's body. Let your Desert Rose take the weapon slots. That one, because the 5-piece here isn't as critical, assuming there's a delay in it proccing, or assuming there are some bugs, which I don't think there are. But obviously you're going to be getting rid of a big factor that usually ends up killing you when a bug turns up. And that pretty much rounds out everything I wanted to talk about with gear. The main point is to just spam sturdy, get as much of these sturdy pieces as you can, gold it out for the extra percentages. You don't really need gold rings. As long as you've got some sort of magic of fountain 5-piece set backing you up, you're going to be good. The weapon traits I run is powered and in pen. This could probably be sturdy, but these shields are pretty expensive. And my off-bar resto staff, I run it with defending. Resto works really well when you're ramping up to large groups. Sometimes a sword and board just doesn't cut it when you're fighting low amounts of people, and you really need that heal, to kind of pull your way through. Now I also run 3 reduced cost jewel enchants. These are really critical if you want to maximize your tanking. These are pretty much mandatory. Hands down, bang for the buck if you do any sort of tanking, if you get focused a lot in Cyrodiil, if your main point of contact, this shield play enchantment is going to be your best bet. It's a couple times more effective than stamina recovery, and it's going to help you. It's going to help you manage your resources. Really, there's a lot of DKs rely on Igneous. And using this on top of the huge heals I'm getting, I was able to get rid of Igneous and free up some space on my sword and board bar. But I mean, outside of that, these are really good. If you haven't tried it, try throwing on at least two enchantments and see how that works for you. Now moving on to skills. My sword and board bar is set up like so. Let me start from the most important bits. So we got Draw Essence. This is the bread and butter of our build. It's the chief reason why we're using Varen's Legacy. Varen's is going to proc here, and when it does, that 1.5k damage on your first tick with lifesteal, it's going to jump to around 5,000, maybe a little bit more. And so the idea being, when you're in a Zerg, you want to be casting Draw Essence once out of every 2 or 3 casts, if you will, and the timing usually ends up working out. And note that every time I cast this, I'm healing for about 30,000, anywhere from 20 to 30,000, depending on the people around me. And this is not using Igneous. This is not doing anything crazy like that. This is just like a naked heal. And I get so much bang for the buck out of it that I can afford to get rid of the Igneous, free up some space on my front bar, and become more magically efficient. If you think about it, assume that I only had 4,000 magicka left to spend. Am I going to use Igneous, or am I going to use Draw Essence, which heals me for 30,000? If you do the math on that, the Igneous costing around 4,000 as well just does not give you enough back. Given that we have such a powerful healing source here that costs the same amount. Moving on to GDBs, one of my favorite skills. What can I say about it? It's great. The healing received buff is great, and it's a good oh shit heal to have on your front bar in case you get swarmed by ranged, or just get taken by surprise. You're going to get ganked a lot, so this is going to help you out. Next important thing is Absorb Magic. I run this mainly for the damage decrease and the reduced cost. I don't actually cast this too often. I'll use it when I'm in a heavy Zerg and I need that extra bit of healing. Sometimes, you know, I'll do a combination like draw Essence, GDB, and then pop Absorb Magic, and I'll be ready to cast my next draw Essence. The idea being that second tick comes off and you've got your magic back. So it's super efficient, you know, it's super powerful, it does a lot of damage, gives you a ton of self-heal. I also got Burning Embers on this front bar. This is a bit more of a flex stylistical choice here. I run it because it mainly helps me get in and out of big groups easily. You know, the biggest trouble that I ran into when I was testing this build was that you know, I'd be fine running against groups of 10 by myself, but you know, just getting up to that group, just fighting through the small pockets of good players that usually hang out around those big Zergs and pick people off. Just getting there was the biggest challenge for me. So this Burning Embers really helps me keep people at bay, helps me ramp up easily to that, you know, to that group of 10, which is your sweet spot. You want to be around, you know, 6 to 10 people around you attacking you. That way you can get all 6 hits on your draw essence off. And this Burning Embers just lets you get in and out easier. It's just, you know, it's a lot less stressful having this on your front bar. Also, because of the bar swap, having it on your back bar would cause you to risk getting CC'd as you're swapping bars, even if you're holding block, which kind of sucks. And then the last slot here is Inner Light. This is very flexible. You can run, you can technically run Igneous here, probably do well on it. I prefer to have a little bit more magic efficiency, which is why I grabbed this for the crit. And the ultimate's going to be Spell Wall. A neat combo you can do here is just pop Spell Wall, spam Draw Essence. You're going to have block on the whole time, so you know you can block cast a lot of your stuff really quickly, and basically become a god for 7 to 10 seconds. On my off bar, a lot of these skills are flex skills. I think the most important one is Volatile Armor, obviously. One thing to note is if I didn't use Inner Light here on the front bar, I'd probably swap it with Volatile Armor, just because of that weapon swap. When you're fighting 10, 20, maybe even 25, 30 people, that weapon swap is going to get you CC'd a lot, even if you're holding block. So, and you know, obviously if you're getting CC'd, you're going to be dying in like half a second without blocking or anything like that. So this is really important. The dot is nice, the AoE damage is nice, helps me keep pressure on their healers and their group as a whole. What can you say about it? It's great. I also run Shuffle. This is a bit more of a stylistical option. I have plenty of stamina when I run this, so you know, I can afford to have this on my back bar. Pretty much cast it every 20 seconds. I'm also doing Burning Talons. Now this is really good because it also works with your Varen's Legacy. So the idea being, you know, if it pops on your front bar, you're able to swap to your back bar, and you know, while you're buffing yourself up mid-fight, you can also throw out a Burning Talons, just make the most of that Varen's proc. Because you know, if you're doing this right, that Varen's gonna be procking for you a couple times per second, sometimes more, sometimes less, but having this here just allows you to really maximize the efficiency of your build, and this does a ton of damage. I grabbed the AoE dot morph just to get that little extra bit of damage in, but you know, both morphs will work for you here. I also run Rapid Regen. This is just to help my passive healing, helps me cast less because you know I've got this running all the time, and it really does add up when you're in a group. Molten Armaments. So this is pretty flex too. You don't really need this because most of your damage and healing is going to come from Varens. I kind of like it just because it's more of a stylistical thing. It helps my ranged heavies, and you know, it lasts a long time, returns some of my stamina. This is probably the only spell that I use that sits on this Earth and Heart tree, which gives you stamina back when you use it. So it's quite nice, situational, it's not necessary. You know, if you don't want to run this, you can run other stuff. Some of you might be wondering about proc stat plus Varens. I can confirm that it does not work with proc stat, so it's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna give you some major like 20k damage procs on it. It's just not gonna work. Doesn't work. Okay, great. And the ultimate is going to be Light's Champion. A lot of people have been complaining about this Resto ult. It probably does need a small nerf. I mean, you know, it being what it is, it not only gives you defense, but it also gives you offense. And this is Fire and Forget, right? So you cast it, and for the next you know, for the next 5 to 10 seconds, you're super strong, which is pretty OP. But it's mainly there to help me, again, ramp up to bigger groups. A lot of times people get smart and they're going to just throw bow-tards at you that stay away from your draw breath range, and so you really need something like this to kind of help you stay in the fight and position yourself correctly. And that's pretty much it for skills. On to CP. Okay, CP time. CP time. Now, CP is pretty self-explanatory. If you understand a lot of the math behind tanking, you're going to be able to get this down pretty well yourself. But I think the main point, I try to hit 75 on this red tree for this healing passive. I mean, it's just great on a DK with a lot of healing passives that you're running. This is going to really help you out, especially at 45k HP. I run 20 Ironclad, 55 Resistant. This is my main source of crit resistance, which is important even for perma-blocking builds, because you know, some attacks like dots, like ground AoEs, are going to bypass you know, your block. They're not going to be affected at all by it. So you want a secondary sort of source to kind of help mitigate that. Note that having high crit res is almost detrimental to you, because as you're blocking, nothing's going to be critting. The attacks that you block are not going to be critting you anyways. So in a sense, this is a little bit redundant, but it's nice to have. A lot of my tanks will pump this. A lot of my friends who play tanks are going to pump this. It's because they tell me a lot of times what ends up killing them aren't those big direct damage hits, but the dots that squirrel through their block and wear them down. So this is pretty important. Next tree over. Let's see, what am I doing here? I'm not pumping too many points into these. This works on the same principle as sturdy, where you know, the more you pump into it, the better it is. So that's why they had to sort of build in you know, a point tier into this, where the more points you pump into it, the more it takes to get you know, an additional percentage. But even so, it's you know, it's just not worth it to me. Dots, sure, I'll pump a little bit of dot, because those tend to get through your block. An important bit in the red tree is kind of twofold. You want to cover your physical resistance detriment. That meaning you want to try to get as close to, or even a little bit above, the 33,000 mark, which gives you, which is the cap at 50%. And this is based on the same principle we've been talking about with sturdy, right? The more you get, the more effective it's going to be. For example, 1% at 50% damage mitigation is going to reduce twice as much damage percentage-wise as 1% at 0% mitigation. So this is definitely important to just pump and get your status close to, if not a little bit above, 33,000. Healing received, same principle, if not even a bit more magnified. You know, I think I talked about this earlier, but with Cyrodiil base being 50% healing received, somebody hitting you with a 30% naked major defile is going to take you down to 20%. They're essentially going to cut your healing down from, if you were to originally heal for 100 points, you're going to be healing for 40 points now, which is major. That's over 50% total decrease. So you want to try to counter and mitigate that by pumping as much healing received as possible. Now note, this is different from healing taken. I might do another video specifically on this mechanic, just because it was a game changer once I understood it. But there you go. What else am I doing? I'm doing break free, 16% on break free, a little bit of sprint, a little bit of bash, pretty self-explanatory, a little bit of match skill recovery, a little bit of tenacity. My stamina recovery is not that great. It's at like 700 or something right now. It's just not that great. What else we got? We got Shadow Ward. I maxed this out. That extra percent I found it might be worth it. It depends on if you're running any sort of major defile, or you want to sort of move your points around. But you know, anything above 23% I think is a good bet. Doing a little bit here in tumbling. That rounds out the green tree and the blue tree. I'm pretty much doing nothing on the physical blue tree. On the Atronach, I'm running 61. I'm really pumping that direct damage because it's going to affect my draw essence, it's going to affect my damage and my self-heal consequently because of that lifesteal mechanic. So really important to really get some juicy points in here. The rest of them I pretty much spread out in between these. I pumped a lot of healing done because you know, at the base I want to be a tank. I want to play a tanky Healy char. I got a little bit of crit damage, healing damage, and a couple points of elemental XP. And that pretty much rounds out CP. You just want to mainly be smart and balance out your attributes. So understanding how these numbers work together is going to be huge. And fortunately, there is some room for leeway here. So you want to do things a little bit differently, move some points around. There's a lot of flexibility here. And that about sums up our video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope I didn't put you all to sleep. And feel free to leave me your comments, your thoughts, your wishes, anything really, in the panel below. Thanks and have a good night, everyone.